Honorable Shri Chidambaram, Reverend Father Rector, respected faculty, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this much-awaited sharing by Shri Chidambaram on the Union Budget presented 10 days ago. One of the hallmarks of Jesuit education is a holistic formation of individuals in all quotients: intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual. LIBA strives its best to offer its students a holistic education, blending classroom and experiential learning, preparing them to be ethical business leaders and principle-centered corporate citizens, contributing to the overall growth of the country. An event like this, to reflect on and critically analyze the country's annual budget and interact with great minds like Shri Chidambaram, I believe, will certainly contribute to achieving this goal. We are indeed privileged and honored to have Shri Chidambaram with us to share his views, critical analysis, and insights on the budget. Shri Chidambaram doesn't need any introduction to this audience. However, courtesy demands, and also for the sake of the newcomers, I'd like to say a few words. He is an illustrious alumnus of Loyola College and a Harvard-educated, successful corporate lawyer known for his clear and brilliant arguments. Currently, he is a member of the Rajya Sabha. He heads the Parliamentary Steering Committee on Home Affairs. He was first elected to the Lok Sabha in 1984, and within a year, at a very young age, he was inducted into the Council of Ministers by Shri Rajiv Gandhi, and he had been in the Council of Ministers for 20 years, holding various portfolios, including Union Finance Minister and Union Home Minister, a great achievement for a person. He has made enormous contribution to the economic growth of India. He has been credited even by his critics for ably and almost single-handedly steering India's economy during the challenging times of Asian crisis and Great Recession in 2008. His budgets were considered dream budgets, focused on the long-term growth of the country. He brought discipline in government spending and launched an ambitious tax reform program to tackle an unwieldy fiscal deficit. Probably this budget is relaxing this fiscal consolidation. Hopefully we'll hear from him on this. We are indeed proud of you and your achievements, sir. Certainly we can't have a better person than him to give us a critical analysis of the budget. I deeply appreciate you coming to LIBA every year, and I welcome you on behalf of our rector, the Jesuit management, and the LIBA fraternity to LIBA once again. Thank you for coming. I may invite Father Rector to present him with a shawl and a bouquet. Thank you, Father. Hearty welcome to each one of you, especially friends from the corporate world, Jesuits, and the members of the Fourth Estate. I'm sure you will have an enriching and insightful experience this evening. Thank you. May I request Mr. Chidambaram to come to the desk.
Good evening to all of you. Reverend Father Francis Jayapati, Father Rector, Director LIBA, Father Christie, faculty, my young students, distinguished guests, friends from the media. Let me begin by apologizing for being almost 20 minutes late. Actually, I should apologize on behalf of the airline, which landed 45 minutes late against a scheduled time of 2:45. They landed only at almost 3:30. But I'm happy that I have been able to come here to continue this series of annual lectures shortly after the Union Budget is presented. Every budget has a context, and every budget must have a purpose. The context is decided by the world's economy, by the state of India's economy, by unexpected events and developments, by anticipated events, and a number of other things. In fact, the context is usually objective. We know where we stand, what are our strengths and weaknesses, and what are the opportunities and the threats. But every budget must also have a purpose. A budget is not as simply accounting for the revenue and accounting for the expenditure. It must have a purpose. Of course, it must account for revenue on the one side and expenditure on the other. But it must also say why we are raising this revenue and why we are incurring this expenditure. And if there is an excess of expenditure over revenue, one must be able to persuasively argue why you need to borrow so much money. Unfortunately, Union Budget 2018-19 has ignored the context in which the budget is being presented. Even more unfortunately, Union Budget 2018-19, it appears, has no purpose at all, except perhaps to win an election in the next 12 to 15 months. Why do I say this? Firstly, let's look at the context. The world economy is growing at a pleasantly surprising brisk pace. It is expected to grow in 2018 by perhaps 3.7 or 3.8%, and in 2019, maybe at even 3.9%. So this is a robust growth period for the world economy. In fact, the world economy recovered about a year and a half ago, and from the beginning of 2016 or the middle of 2016, the world economy is back to its robust growth path. While there are headwinds, and there will be headwinds at any time, one does not anticipate too many headwinds for the world's economy, except perhaps the name Mr. Donald Trump. Apart from Mr. Donald Trump, one can't imagine any headwinds to the world's economy. Many small countries are growing at a brisker pace. Many developed economies are growing at a comfortable rate. And many large economies are growing at a very satisfactory rate, including China, which is 5 times our GDP, yet growing at about 6.5%. The context in India, of course, is slightly different. We had an economy that was growing at 7.5% in 2014-15, 8.2% in 2015-16. But then we shot ourselves in the leg, not once but twice. Firstly, we shot ourselves in the right leg through demonetization. And then before the right leg could heal, we shot ourselves in the left leg through a flawed implementation of GST. Naturally, the economy slumped. It slumped to 7.1% in 2016-17, and by the end of 2017-18, there'll be a further slump to about 6.5%. It's a disheartening, disappointing slump, but yet, even after the slump, India's economy will be growing by 6.5%. So the context is not an unfavorable context. Both the external economy and the internal economy, the context seems quite favorable, unless, of course, having shot ourselves in the right leg once and having shot ourselves in the left leg once, we now decide to shoot ourselves in the head. I sincerely hope that they will not shoot ourselves in the head. Now, given this context, and given the reasons why we find ourselves where we find ourselves, what should have been the purpose of this budget? Remember, 1991, when India was a closed economy and Dr. Manmohan Singh took the economy by its collar, pulled it out of its cocoon of a closed economy and said, now come out and face the world. Remember 1997, when a weak coalition government undertook the most wide-ranging tax reform in both direct taxes and indirect taxes. Remember 2008, when the international financial crisis threatened the collapse of all economies of the world. India, among a few handful of economies, survived that completely unexpected disaster and stood firm and continued to stand firm on its legs. Remember 2012, when after the much trumpeted quantitative easing that had released a flood of liquidity in world markets and led to an inflation spiral, India pulled back and consolidated its fiscal situation. So these are occasions when the hallmark was courage. I would have expected that the hallmark of budget 2018-19 was courage. Unfortunately, courage seems to have deserted the government, and all that remains after reading the numerous pages of the budget speech is rhetoric. This budget ought to have focused on fiscal consolidation. This budget ought to have addressed what Dr. Arvind Subramaniam listed as the three main challenges in the medium term. This budget should have addressed the acute distress in the farm sector, which contributes only about 17% of India's GDP, but on which nearly 60% of the Indian people depend. This budget should have promoted welfare, especially after welfare-damaging measures like demonetization and a hasty implementation of GST. This budget should have concentrated on promoting welfare. Any one of these purposes, or maybe two of these four purposes, or all the four purposes, if they had been kept in mind, this budget would have been a very different budget. If I was writing a budget speech keeping some or all of these four purposes in mind, I would have written a very, very different budget speech. Unfortunately, the government completely misjudged the context and completely overlooked the purpose of the budget in the last year of the term of a government. More about this later. Now let's spend a little time talking about the numbers. You're all students of business administration, so numbers should not frighten you. I know that numbers frighten a lot of people, but numbers should not frighten you. Numbers tell a story which words cannot tell. Let's spend just about 5 or 10 minutes on the numbers. Firstly, every deficit target has been breached. It's not often that every deficit target is breached. This budget will find a place in history for breaching every deficit target. The fiscal deficit was breached as against a target of 3.2, the year will end with 3.5. And next year, against a target of 3, the year will end with 3.3. The revenue deficit target has been breached. Against a target of 1.9, this year will end with a target of 2.6. The effective revenue deficit has been breached. The primary deficit has been breached. Every deficit target has been breached. Secondly, there is a disquieting liberty has been taken with the kind of expenditure that we will make. By breaching the fiscal deficit by 0.3%, government will borrow an additional 48,000 crore rupees. You must add to this number 37,000 crore rupees, which the government should have borrowed, but it asked its proxy, the ONGC, to borrow in return for government shares in HPCL. In fact, it is proxy borrowing on behalf of the government. Therefore, the additional borrowing of the government is 85,000 crore. If I borrow 85,000 crore, my family should ask me, why have you borrowed 85,000 crore? What are you going to spend it on? And if I say, well, I'm going to spend it on building a house, I'm going to spend it on putting up a factory, that would make sense to my family. But where is this 85,000 crore going? The entire additional borrowing and more Let me repeat that. The entire additional borrowing and more is going into revenue expenditure. While the additional borrowing is 85,000 crore, the additional revenue expenditure is 1,07,371 crore. How did they achieve this? They achieved this by cutting capital expenditure by 36,000 crore. So the government has not only been a reckless borrower, it is also a reckless spender, and it has thrown all fiscal prudence to the winds. It is borrowing an additional 85,000 crore. It is cutting back capital expenditure by 36,000 crore and spending on revenue account an additional 1,07,371 crore. Just to complete the numbers, this year's customs duty estimate was 2,45,000 crore. But by the end of March, government says we will collect only 1,35,242 crore. I have not come across a year when there is such a drastic difference between budget estimate and revised estimate. What is worse is for next year, not even 1,35,000 crore will be collected. Next year, the customs target is 1,12,500 crore. Obviously, there is something happening which the government is not willing to share with us. There is a story which the government is hiding. And this is after across-the-board customs duty increases which the finance minister has announced and imposing a surcharge on all imports. I simply cannot understand how customs revenues are taking such a hit from a budget estimate of 2,45,000 crore to a revised estimate of 1,35,242 crore to next year's estimate of 1,12,500 crore. These are the numbers which you must keep in mind. These numbers, to my mind, conclusively establish that this government is a reckless borrower, is a reckless spender, and has severely compromised macroeconomic stability in the budget 2018-19. There's another set of numbers you must note. Inflation is a cruel tax. Why is it cruel? Because inflation is a tax that falls equally on the rich and the poor. Some taxes fall largely on the rich but spare the poor. Some taxes fall on the rich and the poor, but concessions are given to the poor through exemptions, through rebates. But inflation is a cruel levy that falls both on the rich and the poor. It's like Cyclone Oki. If a cyclone hits a city, it will hit the rich and the poor. But the rich are better insulated because they live in pakka houses. The poor are less insulated because they live in slums, live in kacha houses. Since inflation is a tax that falls equally on the rich and the rich are better placed to bear the tax because they are rich. The poor are less well placed to bear the tax because they are poor. In December 2017, the last month for which we have numbers, WPI stood at 3.6% and CPI stood at 5.2%. So the question will arise, and I asked this question in Parliament, what are the estimates of average WPI and average CPI for the whole year? And what is your forecast for the next year? There was no answer from the government either in the Lok Sabha, day before yesterday, or in the Rajya Sabha yesterday. But fortunately, the Governor Reserve Bank 3 days ago has provided the answer. The Governor has said that going forward, in the period April 2018 to December 2018, inflation is expected to rise to 5.6%. So the next year is going to be an inflationary year. Now for 2017-18, government has assumed that nominal growth rate of the economy will be 10.5% and the GDP will grow by 6.5%, which means government is assuming that inflation will be 4%. 10.5 minus 6.5, roughly inflation will be 4%. For next year, government is assuming nominal growth rate will be 11.5%. If the nominal growth rate will be 11.5% and the Governor Reserve Bank of India has predicted inflation will rise to 5.6%, for the sake of easy subtraction, let's take it as 5.5%. So if you have nominal growth rate of 11.5% and inflation of 5.5%, what does growth be? Real growth will be 6%. 11.5 minus 5.5, growth will be 6%. Government is unwilling to acknowledge this hard fact. So what do we have for the last 4 years? We touched a peak of 8.2% in 2015-16. It came down to 7.1% in 2016-17. It will come down to 6.5% in 2017-18, and is further poised to go down to 6% in 2018-19. So 2018-19 will be a year of lower growth and higher inflation. A year of lower growth and higher inflation cannot be a very happy new year. If the Prime Minister wished you all a happy new year, I suggest he take back those good wishes now. It will be a year of lower growth and higher inflation. I won't burden you with more of these numbers. The sum and substance of my argument, therefore, is government failed the test of fiscal consolidation. And as I will show presently, government failed the test of relieving acute agricultural distress. The government failed the test of promoting welfare. And again, as I will show you presently, government failed the test of providing jobs. On every major challenge, government has failed. You may ask me, was not government forewarned? The government was. Not by average people like you and me. The government was forewarned by no less a person than the Chief Economic Advisor, Dr. Arvind Subramanian. Every year, just before the budget is presented, the Chief Economic Advisor presents the economic survey. It's a well-researched document, well-argued document, and is relied upon by every analyst in the world in order to analyze the state of the Indian economy. It's the most authentic document, a time-honored document produced by the Government of India every year. What did Dr. Arvind Subramaniam say? I will call him the good doctor. He's a good doctor. The government hired him in 2014 and did not fire him as they fired two other people. So the government must believe in Dr. Arvind Subramaniam. What did the good doctor say? The good doctor said, after nearly 4 years in office, the government has failed to address the challenges in education, employment, and agriculture. In education, Dr. Subramanian includes health, but he calls it education. So after 4 years in office, government has failed to address the challenges of education and health, employment, and agriculture. And let me quote a short passage on each one of them. On education, I quote, "The issue that needs re-emphasizing is education. Looking at the looming technological headwinds and the risks of there being a stall in India's convergence process, the education challenge cannot be addressed soon enough given India's learning outcomes." Education, including health, is a big challenge. On agriculture, the economic survey says, the level of real agricultural GDP and real agricultural revenues has remained constant. I hope you understand the implications of this statement. Real agricultural wages and real agricultural output has remained constant over 4 years. While nominally wages may have risen and nominally outputs may have risen, if you adjust for inflation, real agricultural wages and real agricultural output has remained constant. This means that in a growing economy, an economy that is supposed to be growing at 6 or 6.5 or 7%, relative to the non-agricultural sector, agriculturists and farmers have become poorer and poorer in the last 4 years. If this real income remains constant, if this real output remains constant, yet the size of the pie has increased by 6 or 7%, somebody else has become richer, and relative to that person, this person has become poorer and poorer. Unemployment, the survey says, providing India's burgeoning labor force with good, high productivity jobs will remain a pressing medium-term challenge. So the economic survey, authored by the good doctor, says, after 4 years, the government faces the challenge of education and health, challenge of agriculture, and challenge of employment. I want to ask, as an average citizen of this country, I want to ask the Prime Minister, his ministers, the Finance Minister, if after 4 years in office, there is no improvement in education or health or agriculture or employment, what the heck have you been doing in the last 4 years? Why are you remaining in office? For 4 years, at the end of 4 years, the report card says you have failed in physics, you have failed in biology, you have failed in chemistry, and you want to be a doctor. If you have failed in education and health, if you have failed in agriculture, if you have failed in employment, why are you in government? Criminal neglect of agriculture. There is no trade-off between MSP and inflation. MSP will be slightly inflationary, but MSP is an absolute necessity. Price is the best signal for the farmer. Any other signal is a weak signal. Price is the best signal. You sow paddy, you will get so much. You grow sugarcane, you will get so much. You cultivate soya bean, you will get so much. That is the best signal to the farmer to go to the field and start plowing. Under the UPA government, between 2004 and 2014, in 10 years, we doubled MSP. If MSP was 300 rupees, 10 years later it was 600 rupees. If MSP was 1,800 rupees per quintal, 6 years later it was 3,600 rupees per quintal. We doubled MSP because we realized that MSP is the best signal to the farmer, and that is the only way in which farmers in this country can be encouraged to remain in farming, remain in agriculture. This government cynically ignored the interest of the farmer for 2 years. And suddenly they wake up today and say, oh, we are going to give you MSP, which is cost plus 50%. This is what I call the first Jumla, the MSP Jumla. India has contributed many words to the English language. Every year we contribute many words to the English language. Curry is a word we have contributed to the English language. Tikka is a word we have contributed to the English language. If you open the dictionary, you will find Konikipoli is a word, which is Kanakapulle. Konikipoli is a word we have contributed to the English language. I have no doubt in my mind, 2 years from today, the editors of Oxford Dictionary will declare that Jumla is a new English word, and this is a contribution of the Government of India and the people of India. What is this MSP Jumla that they have said? We're going to give to the farmer cost plus 50%. Immediately, Dr. Ashok Gulati, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, and many other agricultural scientists said, which cost? For the farmer, there are 3 costs. One is A2. A2 is input cost. Cost of seeds, cost of electricity, cost of fertilizer, cost of hired labor. These are input costs. Are you going to give input cost plus 50%? The second cost is A2 plus family labor, FL. Because in most farms, the family works, and that is not costed. You have to really cost that labor. Labor is not free. So the next cost is A2 plus FL. Are you going to give 50% over A2 plus FL? There is a third cost called C2 cost that includes notional rent for land and notional interest for the capital employed. Are you going to give C2 plus 50%? The budget speech was silent. What was, of course, audacious was the budget speech said we have already given cost plus 50% for some crops. So we asked, which crops? When did you give? Where did you give? And today it is exposed that the government in some crops has given A2 plus 50%. That is not what the Swaminathan Committee recommended. That is not what agricultural economists want. That is not what farmers want. Farmers want all costs to be taken into account plus 50% on that. Government did not explain this in the budget, and 10 days after the budget was presented, government has still not explained what is this MSP equal to cost plus 50%. Which cost? And look at another aspect. The Rabi crop is already over. You can't give the new MSP to the Rabi crop that has already been harvested. The next harvest is the Kharif crop, what we call Kuruvai in Tamil Nadu. That is going to come in September, October. The Kuruvai or the Kharif harvest will be in September, October. So what the government is promising today on the 1st of February is, in September, October, we will give you this cost plus 50%. This is the kind of pie in the sky argument. By other reports, government is planning to advance elections to September or October. So it's clearly an election jumla. This is clearly to influence the farming community in the event elections are advanced to September, October, by saying, listen, we announced in February, we're going to give you cost plus 50%. Wait for the Kharif harvest, but in the meanwhile, please vote for us. This is the worst jumla. This is the unkindest cut on the farmers. The farmers have not accepted it. The farmers are seething with anger, and there is so much ferment and so much unrest all over rural India. This is the first jumla. The second jumla is the jobs jumla. Government has no data. The Labour Service Bureau puts out some data. The Center for Monitoring Indian Economy puts out data. According to that data, very, very few jobs were created in the last 2 years or 2.5 years. This morning's newspaper reported that in Madhya Pradesh, for 738 peon jobs, there were 3 lakh applications. 3 lakh applications for 738 peon jobs. The paper also reported that, going by the accounts of employment exchanges, if 100 people are registered in an employment exchange, only 2 people get jobs in a year. The placement rate of employment exchanges in India is 2%. We know that jobs are not being created. Why do I say that? Jobs are created by the small and medium sector. Jobs are not created by the large sector. It is a rule of thumb that in a large project, if you invest 1 crore rupees, it will create 1 job. That's a rule of thumb. 1,000 crore rupees steel project will generate directly and indirectly 1,000 jobs. But the same 1,000 crore invested in hundreds of small and medium enterprises will generate many, many more jobs. 90% of all jobs in this country are in the SME sector. If you take the EPFO registration, 90% of all registered employees get a salary of less than 15,000 rupees. 15,000 is average. It is a small and medium sector which generates jobs. But that sector was devastated by demonetization. Hundreds of units closed down. Hundreds of other units cut back production and retrenched their workers. And before they could recover from the blow of demonetization, they had GST imposed upon them, and the flawed GST damaged them even further. So jobs are not being created. The government today says, we have created 70 lakh jobs in the current year. We were all completely taken aback. How did India, the formal economy, create 70 lakh jobs? We have never done that before. The finance minister says, I'm relying upon a private research paper by 2 private academics who had, obviously, privileged access to some EPFO data. So we asked him, why were the 2 academics given privileged data, privileged access? Why was the data not put in the public domain? Why have you not given the data to us? Why have you not given the data to other think tanks? There's no answer. And according to this private research paper by 2 private academics who have got privileged access to some unpublished data, 70 lakh jobs in the formal sector will be created or have been created in 2017-18. So we went back and looked at published data. We have data today about the number of contributing registered EPFO members. Contributing registered EPFO members. And what did we find? In 2014-15, when the economy grew by 7.5%, 23 lakh more contributing members came on the rolls of EPFO. So 23 lakh jobs, according to the government, was quote unquote created. By government's argument, not my argument. When the economy was growing at 7.5%, 23 lakh new jobs were created. Government is counting every new contributor as a new job. In 2015-16, when the economy grew at 8.2%, the number increased by 27 lakhs. In 2016-17, when the economy slumped to 7.1%, according to this data, the number increased by 75 lakhs. When the economy slumped from 8.2 to 7.1, the number of jobs, quote unquote, created is 75 lakhs. And in the current year, 2017-18, when the economy has suffered a further slump to 6.5%, government claims we have created another 70 lakh jobs. We don't need a PC Sarkar anymore. We can be quite happy with Modi Sarkar. How are these jobs created? The economy is going down, but jobs are created. So I told my fellow parliament members, there's a simple economic sutra. Let the economy go down to 5%, 100 lakh jobs will be created. Let it go down to 4%, 125 lakh jobs will be created. Let it go down to 3%, 150 lakh jobs will be created. Once we perfect this model, we can sell this model to the whole world. Don't bother about growth. Let growth go down and down and down. Jobs will be created. It will go up and up and up. This is the second jumla. The ILO definition of a job is, it must be regular, it must be certain, and it must be reasonably secure. Regularity. A professor comes to LIBA, he knows that the job is there. He comes here, he comes as a professor, goes back home as a professor, next morning he comes as a professor. The job is there. It's a regular job. It is certain. It is not casual employment. It is not temporary employment. It is not sporadic employment. It is certain the job is there. And it is reasonably secure. Reasonably secure, subject to disciplinary rules, it is reasonably secure. That is a job. Their definition of jobs, of course, is frying pakodas. Selling pakodas is a job. I didn't say that, the Prime Minister said it. So I recommended to the Finance Minister day before yesterday in Parliament, please recommend to the ILO to amend its definition to say frying pakodas and selling is also a job. I don't know if you have seen a little television clip on one of the channels, which I think is now become a meme in social media. Today, the rate is a PhD pakoda sells for 25 rupees a pakoda. An MA, MSc pakoda sells for 15 rupees a pakoda. A BA, BSc pakoda sells for 10 rupees. An SSLC pakoda will sell for as little as 5 rupees. And an 8th standard pakoda will sell at 1 rupee. Depending upon which pakoda you want, you can buy that pakoda. A LIBA pakoda may sell, I hope, for 25 rupees. That's the kind of jobs which this government says we are creating. This is the insult to the intelligence of the people of India, insult to the intelligence of the young people of India who are crying for jobs. Remember, a Hardik Patel or a Jignesh Mevani or an Alpesh Thakur cannot mobilize hundreds of thousands of young people simply on the basis of caste. It might appear to be caste mobilization, but the underlying current, the driving fury is joblessness. People are without jobs today, which is why they are assembling in large numbers and protesting. The third jumla is his health insurance jumla. Hitler and Goebbels perfected the art of making people believe them. And they said, if you want to lie to the people, don't utter small lies. Small lies are usually not believed. Utter a big lie. A big lie has a better chance of being believed. The bigger the lie, the chances are better that it will be believed. So if you want to lie, don't indulge in petty lies. Make a big lie, a very, very big lie. In 2016-17, this very government announced a national health insurance scheme. It was intended to cover about 6 crore families, and the coverage was up to 1 lakh rupees. It was announced with great fanfare in the 2016-17 budget. But like all budget announcements, the government believes in short memories of the people, so after a few days, it went off from the front pages into the back pages, and then it disappeared from the media. Nobody asked the government what happened to that scheme. I'll tell you what happened. Nothing happened. The cabinet never met and approved a scheme. No scheme was ever implemented. No money was ever allotted. The scheme was given a quiet burial and nobody remembered it. Believing that nobody will remember the 2016-17 scheme, government today comes forward and says, we will announce a bigger scheme. This scheme will cover not 6 crore families, this scheme will cover 10 crore families. This scheme will cover 50 crore people. Roughly 40% of India will be covered. It is called the National Health Protection Scheme. The budget speech did not use the word insurance, so we were not clear on day one whether this is an insurance-based scheme or is it a pay-as-you-go scheme. As it turned out, it is an insurance-based scheme. So we frantically went through the budget documents to find out, to cover 10 crore families, to cover 50 crore people, and coverage up to 5 lakhs of rupees, it will require a huge amount by way of insurance premium. Where is the money provided? We searched and searched and searched and found that money has been provided. You want to know how much has been provided? Zero has been provided. A big zero has been provided. Not 1 rupee has been provided. So we did some calculations. State governments run such schemes. Andhra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, I think even Bengal to some extent. They run small schemes. They cover up to 1 lakh. We put together the premium paid by all the states which are running such schemes. The total number comes to 1 lakh crore rupees a year. The premium that is contributed by all the state governments which run these schemes comes to approximately 1 lakh crore rupees. If you want to cover 10 crore families, 50 crore individuals, not for 1 lakh, but for 5 lakhs, how much will be the premium? You do your own calculation, we have done it. At 1% of coverage, it will cost you 50,000 crore rupees a year. At 2%, it will cost you 1 lakh crore rupees a year. At 3%, it will cost you 1.5 lakh crore rupees a year. Let's take the middle number, 1 lakh crore. You have not provided 1 rupee. And you are saying, claiming that you will introduce a scheme that will cost you 1 lakh crore rupees. Government, of course, is shuffling its feet and saying, no, it won't cost so much. States will contribute 40%. So I ask, which state? Which state have you consulted? Which state has agreed to come on board? And why should a state abandon its own scheme with its own branding and come on Modi Care? Which state has been consulted? None. Which state has agreed to come on board? None. Yet you say 40% will come from the states. Even your 60% will cost you 60,000 crore. To that the finance minister says, I will raise more resources. From where? Where will you raise more resources from? You've imposed every kind of tax possible. You've increased customs duties. You've imposed long-term capital gains. You have maintained STT. You have maintained corporate tax for the bigger corporates. You have maintained individual and household tax rates. You have imposed a long-term capital gains. You have taxed petrol and diesel to the hilt. There's no room for increased taxation. From where will you raise this money? It's absolutely clear to us that this scheme is the biggest jumla of this government. This scheme will not see the light of the day. If it does, it will come in some kind of a rudimentary form. Most diseases, most procedures will be excluded. It will be made so difficult for somebody in a village in Bihar to access this scheme that he won't even try to access this scheme. So 90% of the people won't even make an attempt to take the benefit of the scheme, and they will announce a scheme and pay a small premium to insurance companies and say, we have announced the scheme. World over, insurance-driven health insurance is considered as beneficial to the insurance company, not to the patient. America follows the insurance-based model. England, Europe follow the public health care model. I'm not entering into a debate which model is better, but having announced an insurance-based model, not providing 1 rupee and not outlining the contours of the scheme in your budget speech, I think this is the biggest jumla of this budget. This government has not promoted welfare either. What is the expenditure on health? In 2017-18, the government will spend 53,198 crore. In 2018-19, government will spend 54,667 crore, an increase of about 1,400 crore. What is expenditure on education? In 2017-18, government will spend 81,869 crore. In 2018-19, it will spend 85,010 crore, which is an increase of 3,130 crore. You have an additional revenue expenditure of 1,07,372 crore, but on health and education, the additional expenditure is only 4,600 crore, a very small fraction. Not only that, in what they call core schemes, government has actually cut the expenditure next year. Let me give you a few examples. National Rural Drinking Water Mission. Current year, 7,050 crore. Next year, 7,000 crore. Swachh Bharat Mission. Current year, 19,248 crore. Next year, 17,843 crore. National Health Mission. Current year, 31,292 crore. Next year, 30,634 crore. Price Stabilization Fund. Current year, 3,500 crore. Next year, 1,500 crore. Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana, rural electrification. Current year, 5,400 crore. Next year, 3,800 crore. There are many examples. In Maganrega, for example, the expenditure this year and next year is exactly the same. They're not even providing for inflation increase. For midday meal scheme, it's exactly the same. They're not providing for any inflation-based increase. So in every which way, failing fiscal consolidation, failing creation of employment, failing to relieve agricultural distress, failing to provide for jobs, failing to promote welfare, this budget has ignored the prescription and the course of treatment of its own doctor. The patient has been a terrible patient. And as far as we are concerned, this government has turned out to be a thoroughly incompetent government in managing the economy. In times of crisis, we need competent managers. In 1991 and in subsequent years, which I referred to in the opening part of my speech, we had competent managers of the economy. Today, we have the most incompetent set of managers managing the economy. In the last year of its 5-year term, the country has been brought down to 8.2, 7.1, 6.5, and perhaps 6 or 6.5 next year. Inflation will rise, fiscal deficit will widen, macroeconomic stability has been compromised, distress in the farm sector continues, young men and women will be without jobs, private investment is falling, it has fallen by 6% of GDP, credit is sluggish, exports are well below the high mark of $300 billion reached 4 years ago. In every which way you look at this budget and the economy, this budget has failed this country. In conclusion, all I can say is, after seeing the 5th budget of this government, all I can say is, thank God this government will not present a 6th budget. Thank you.
We will now have a question-answer session.
My name is Rajesh. So my question is, so actually I feel that lasting solution to farm distress could have been found if instead of subsidy, investment in this sector would have been increased, especially in storage, marketing infrastructure, food processing, and reforming and regulating markets, and expanding extensions for horticulture and floriculture. So what are your views on this?
I agree with you. But there is no investment being made. Please remember the gross fixed capital formation has fallen from 35% to below 29%. There is a fall in investment of 6% of GDP, which means people are not investing. Private investment is not taking place. And government is cutting capital expenditure. So what you say is correct, but who is investing?
Hi sir, I'm Vivek. Sir, in a public meeting, you told that black money is not a stock, it's a flow, with an example of how money flows from a farmer to Saravanan via lawyer. Do you think that by changing to digital transaction, even these black money flow can be stopped? or
changing
prevented?
no, it can't. Because in India, as I explained in numerous meetings, we have two kinds of incomes, taxable income and non-taxable income. In most countries, every kind of income is taxable. In India, there is a very large part of incomes which are non-taxable. Agricultural income is non-taxable. Income of religious institutions is non-taxable. Income of charities is non-taxable. Income of scheduled tribes is non-taxable. Income of people living in the northeast is non-taxable. As long as you have taxable income and non-taxable income coexisting, and there is money flow from non-taxable income earner to a taxable income earner, and from a taxable income earner to a non-taxable income earner, a farmer paying the lawyer, and the lawyer paying a salary to a worker in the northeast, or a factory owner paying a salary to a worker in the northeast, simply by digitization, you can't stop this phenomenon of flow of money from taxable sector to the non-taxable sector, and from non-taxable sector to a taxable sector. This is a peculiarity of the Indian Constitution and the Indian tax laws.
Good evening, sir. I'm Sandil. So you have been one of the strong proponents of fiscal consolidation. So going by that, what is the magical figure of 3% fiscal deficit target, especially which has been a borrowed concept from the European Union, which they themselves have agreed in 1992 by Maastricht Treaty. So to my knowledge, it has a fair, inversely proportional to credit expansion. If the fiscal deficit is lower, fiscal expansion will be more. And if its fiscal deficit is higher, we'll be having the monetary expansion, low monetary expansion. So your views on that. Why can't we go with the N.K. Singh's committee report of having a fiscal deficit range instead of a particular target?
Because I think Mr. N.K. Singh is wrong. Have you read Dr. C. Rangarajan's column, I think today in one of the papers? This very question has been answered. It's after intensive debate among governors of central banks all over the world, among economists. There is today a broad consensus that the borrowing limit should be 3% of GDP. Nobody is saying that in an exceptional situation you cannot relax. Suppose there is a war. You may have to relax. Suppose there is a huge national calamity in a small country. You may have to relax. But under normal circumstances, there is a very, very, very broad consensus, very wide consensus, that 3% is a limit of borrowing for the government. That will give enough money to the government to spend, invest. That will leave enough money for the private sector to borrow and invest. Having arrived at this broad consensus and having accepted this broad consensus, and this very government said, yes, on the day they took office, they said, our goal is to achieve 3%. What is their record? When I came back to the finance ministry after the years of monetary expansion, fiscal expansion, the fiscal deficit was 5.8%. I publicly said this is unacceptable. We have to bring it down. I had 2 years, 2012-13 and 2013-14. I brought 5.8% to 4.4%. So when this government came into office, they got 4.4%. And now, this year, the 5th year, they will end with 3.3%, 2018-19. So we took 2 years to bring it down from 5.8 to 4.4, a reduction of 1.4. They have taken 5 years to bring it down by 1.1%, which is why we say this government has not done enough fiscal consolidation.
So, my name is Ramesh. Well, do you have 3 good points about this particular budget in your analysis, sir?
Oh, there are many nuggets. When somebody writes a speech running to 166 paragraphs, there are bound to be some nuggets. The nuggets are, they have not abolished Maganrega. They have kept Maganrega and kept the allotment. They have announced 9,000 kilometers of additional national highway, which is welcome. They have increased the allocation to Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, rural roads, which is welcome. They have announced 24 new medical colleges, which is welcome. So there are many nuggets. But any finance minister, any government presenting a budget is bound to have a few nuggets. So I hope you are satisfied with the answer.
Hello, sir. Good evening. My question is related to the long-term capital gains tax. So the government has introduced it and they have also decided to keep the STT. So since that announcement, there is a meltdown in the markets. So do you feel, considering the situation, the reintroduction of LTCG is a good move? And if not for the LTCG, is there any other way to garner the revenue without affecting the market sentiments? What is your views on that, sir?
See, in principle, there's nothing wrong with LTCG. It is there in many countries. There is LTCG in our country also for other asset classes. We did not have LTCG in equities. We abolished it and introduced STT. So in principle, there's nothing wrong with LTCG. The questions are, one, when you introduced LTCG, should you not have abolished STT? Question 2, is this the correct time? Is this the right moment to introduce LTCG when capital investment has fallen by 6%? These questions should have been posed and answered. If there's booming capital investment and you want to go back to LTCG, maybe there won't be so much unhappiness. But when capital investment has fallen by 6% of GDP, you keep STT, which replaced LTCG and equity, and you introduce LTCG, which is why the market is reacting the way it's reacting.
Hello, sir. I'm Sakya, sir. Sir, this is about fiscal deficit. So the revised fiscal deficit is 3.5% against the targeted 3.2%. So after the budget, Finance Minister explained that this is because the GST collections for the March month of 2018 is not factored in the collections. So because of that, the revised fiscal deficit has been 3.5%. But so if you see, sir, on an average, the GST revenue collection for the center, it is around 50,000 crore. So if you consider that also, the fiscal deficit is coming to 3.2%. So do you want to comment anything about it?
He has accounted for GST collection of 4,44,631 crore.
Yes, sir.
And in his interviews, he says this is for 11 months. I didn't understand.
No, sir. 8 months.
He's been repeatedly saying 11 months.
Okay.
When I asked him in Parliament, GST was introduced only on 1st of July. It can at best be 9 months. If March doesn't come in, it can be 8 months. Even if you take 4,44,631 and count it as 8 months collection, the monthly collection comes to approximately 50,000 crore. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So he says, I lost 50,000 crore and therefore I'm borrowing an additional 48,000 crore. it appears to make sense. But what happened to the 37,000 crore that ONGC was asked to borrow on his behalf? That is proxy borrowing.
Okay.
What happened to that 37,000 crore? And where are you spending this additional amount? 1,01,731 crore in revenue account. So even if we concede that 1 month's GST has cost him about 50,000 crore, actually in service tax, we collect the 12th month service tax before the end of the month.
Yes.
So we collect 12 months.
Yeah, yes, sir.
That is the pattern. But let's assume he's right, that he collected only 8 months and therefore he lost 50,000. That only explains 50,000 for which he borrowed. But he doesn't explain the 37,000 crore which the ONGC was asked to borrow on behalf of the government. It's actually government borrowing. What else is it?
Good evening, sir. My question is with regard to personal taxation. So the government has given us a standard deduction of 40,000 in lieu of the medical and transport allowance. But if you see, effectively the savings at the larger tax bracket is almost the same. So my question is, given that the salaried persons from the major portion of the tax form a major portion of the taxpayer base, do you think that he's been neglected in the current tax?
It is. You see, according to the budget speech, the relief in personal taxation amounts to about 9,000 crore, I think. Who pays personal tax? Middle class and above. The middle class, which is the income tax paying class, and the saving class pays an additional 9,000 crore. But for the same class, you have now imposed a surcharge and you have imposed an LTCG, which is also paid by the same class, middle class savers. And you're going to collect 31,000 crore under those two heads. So you give 9,000 crore and collect 31,000 crore. So net, the tax-paying saving class is poorer in this budget. They have been given relief of 9,000 crore, but the government is collecting another 31,000 crore rupees from them. So where is the relief to the middle class? Where is the relief to the saving class? That is why middle class and the saving class is very unhappy.
Thank you, sir.
Where will you save? Land prices are down for the last 2.5, 3 years. Everybody moved to mutual funds. Now you're taxing mutual fund gains. Now where will they move now? They will have to move to gold. I fear that the asset that will become the preferred asset will be gold now. And that is an unproductive asset. As if you don't encourage capital formation, if you don't encourage capital investment, in the long run that will hurt the economy. This is what Governor RBI said. There are 5 taxes today on capital. Corporate tax, dividend distribution tax, additional dividend tax, STT, and now LTCG. If you tax capital so much, who will be interested in investing capital? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions. I invite Father Christie to present a memento to our chief guest as a token of our gratitude. Thank you, Father. I invite Dr. Indra to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, one and all. It's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. I would like to thank Sri P. Chidambaram, Honorable Member of Parliament, for taking his time off and being here with us today. Sir, I, on behalf of the family of LIBA, thank you for your august presence here with us today. Your budget analysis has been most informative and has given us new perspectives on the same. It sure looks that it's going to be a very interesting and challenging year this year. I thank Reverend Father Francis Jayapati, Rector, Loyola College, for being a constant pillar of support for us for all our endeavors here in LIBA. I thank all the distinguished invitees, alumni, and members of the press who are here with us today. I thank all the students and the staff of LIBA for showing us such a response to the event and for all their efforts in making this possible. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This marks the end of the session. Kindly rise for the national anthem. Janaganamana Adhinayaka Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Utkala Vanga Vindhya Himachala Yamuna Ganga Uchala Jaladhi Taranga तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे